All right. So first things first, starting the episode off. On this day, December 26th, the history was made by Abraham Lincoln. Some skeletons came a-knocking. 38 Dakota men were executed by order of Abraham Lincoln. Now, on this day, 160 years ago, there was this interesting incident. The execution happened in Dakota, Minnesota, in front of a 4,000 deep group of spectators. Some historical accounts say that the men held hands and sang a traditional Dakota song in the moments leading up to their deaths. The empathy builds. Often erased from history, the men's hangings were direct consequences of the U.S. and Dakota War of 1862. The war, according to this liberal hippie at Yahoo News, the war was the result of broken treaties and broken promises by the big mean U.S. government, and the Dakota land continued to be dismissed. Now, a real historical event or analysis of the situation from history.com says the Dakota War, or Little Crow's War, was an armed conflict between the United States and several eastern bands of Dakota, collectively known as the Santee Siwa. It began on August 18th, 1862, when the Dakota, who were facing starvation and displacement, attacked the white settlements at the Lower Siwa Agency along the Minnesota River Valley. Okay, let's just say two different accounts. He said, she said, but all I do know is desperate men take on desperate actions. And fair. So if we're going to also say the big mean Americans were not staying in their zone, but then also you in your zone, the buffaloes weren't just falling in your lap, right? You just kept doing the smoke dance, praying to the sky, and a deer didn't come through. So you're starving. And yet those guys are proactively hunting. They've actually now got cattle and farm. Yeah, there would be no incentive like the Palestinians to not stay in your zone. Okay, we continue. Lincoln ended up only approving the execution of Dakota's leaders, who were proven to have committed civilian massacres. While the 38 men approved for execution were awaiting their demise, 3,000 other tribal members and prisoners were being sent to Fort Snelling. Now, I'm not going to even sit here and pretend they were probably treated well. I'm sure that didn't go well for them either.
Probably not.
In the fall of 1862, after the United States failed to meet its treaty obligations with the Dakota people, several Dakota warriors raided an American settlement, killed 5 settlers, and stole some food. The liberal concession. This began a period of armed conflict between some of the Dakota people and the settlers and the U.S. military. After more than a month, several hundred of the Dakota warriors had surrendered, and the rest fled north into what now is considered Canada. Those who surrendered were quickly tried in military tribunals, which, according to this legal analysis from a what school is it? Minnesota.
University of Minnesota.
Yeah. They were unfair. Just unfair, mean trials. 303 deaths seemed too genocidal for President Lincoln, but he didn't order retrials. Instead, he simply modified the criteria of what charges warranted a death sentence. Under his new criteria, only 2 of the Dakota warrior leaders were sentenced to die. That small number seemed too lenient, and President Lincoln was concerned about the uprising of his white American settlers in that area. So, for a second time, instead of ordering retrials, he merely changed the criteria once again of what warranted a death sentence. Ultimately, 39 Dakota men were sentenced to die, and through this further analysis, one of them was pardoned. And so there was a hanging of 38 men publicly for this Minnesota settlers to check it out. Anyway, that being said, that's what happened today in history. Yep. Before I go on my diatribe, David, what are your thoughts on today's day in history?
So, they say the history is written by the victors, and definitely when it comes to Native American history, yeah, we really do sugarcoat quite a few things, or maybe we just ignore.
Well, not until those victors start dyeing their hair blue and tucking their pequeños.
Yeah, and I think this is fair history to bring back. So what if you were to poll just about everybody? What's our greatest American president? Abe Lincoln's probably up there. We're pretty high. One, top two, top three, just depends.
It's the penny. It's number one.
And the big conceit is, well, he freed the slaves. He did a lot of work there. There's always a side B to these types of stories, and with this, he initially I always like the conceit. Well, I'll execute all 303 of them that we take to trial. Ooh, that's going to seem too genocidal. So let's go back to what was it, 10, 12? People are going to be pissed if I don't kill enough people. So we revert that number back to 30. Well, it was eventually 39, but 38. Oof. Yeah, not a good look. They're not, when they're building statues of Abraham Lincoln, this isn't probably what they're thinking of here. So it's always good to show, hey, our leaders do have faults. And I think in fairness to the whole situation, we were a colonizing country at the time. We were expanding our borders, really figuring out. 'Cause I don't think the world map really was quite written at that point in history to the knowledge we have here today. So as we're always expanding our borders and just being a more prosperous country and really taking up the space that I think as a country we felt like we deserved, there was some casualties in the end. And the Native Americans definitely were.
Implying that it wasn't deserved. If the position you're going to present is that all humans have faults, can you please highlight for me the human fault in this decision by an American president?
Well, the fault definitely did, kill people who were in a desperate situation. Now, let's also
wait. Oh. But how's that different than what happened on October 7th? That was a desperate situation.
That was a desperate situation. Yep.
So at what point do you draw the line? A savage attack on innocent settlers is not far removed from bombing a concert in Israel.
Yep.
So explain to me the human fault in leadership here.
So I think where we end up on, and part of the fault is changing your narrative on who you're going to kill based on how many people are going to be upset.
Yeah,
that right there just shows just how little value you have for life. And let's just assume he toiled over it for days and had this was really a big decision, just like Harry Truman, deciding to set the atomic bombs off in Japan. He toiled at it for days, but then to come up to one number and not stick to your convictions on the first number, and then just go, well, we need to go to another number. Now we need to go to another number. It's the kind of the reverse going back. That just shows kind of little regard for life. And I think if you were to go back in time and to sit and talk with the American settlers, I don't think they had a whole lot of respect for the Native Americans there. Absolutely, probably didn't. And it shows by the actions of not only our government, but I think just the people in general. They just saw them as savages. They just saw them as just go away. Oh, we don't really want you here.
Let me push that point a little bit more.
Okay.
Though. Do you understand how this is different than white settlers trying to socially reside with Indian immigrants or Muslim immigrants or Chinese immigrants? At least there's this shared understanding of human civility.
Mm-hmm.
This tribal existence, this savage primal existence is so removed from a society. Brian, pull up the definition of a society for me, right? So what we're trying to do is share a society because our society conquered yours, but we're not so savage like you guys. We're not so savage that we want to completely erase your existence. We want to at least attempt at coexistence. Brian, what's the definition of a society?
The aggregate of people living together in more or less ordered community.
Boom. Yep. So we need to share order in this community, and we're on two different orders. Again, this whole map, Brian, give us this one. You can pick a spot on this map, and except for the other people playing with sticks over here, everywhere else, most people understand forks, roads, maps, schools. Okay, but we want to try to coexist. So at what point do we even Amish people who go, you're going to keep making discs
Furniture,
that's going to
yep,
lead
yep.
to iPhones, that's going to lead to satellites. We want nothing to do with that. But I'll sell you a table, right?
Yep.
I can build cabinets.
Yep.
So like even where their social view is a totally different vein, a totally different road, they still parallel most societies enough to coexist. Because what's beautiful about this place is it's not just one society. We need it to be for narratives. It's the white people, but it isn't. It's a plethora, an unnamed number of societies that coexist. Even painting white people is such a blatant crime. Greeks are not like Irish, not like Canadians, not like Alaskans. They're all different. You're going to say they're like Russians? They're not. They're not. So all of them at least share enough of a thread to coexist. This is your existence. I'm sorry. Is a stick in the current. You are literally against the current.
Yep.
You've created an impossibility to coexist if and when there's a conflict, you then take arms. Whether it's out of desperity or not, be happy you exist. I know that's cruel, but the fact that we can't assimilate you literally, I can't share Martin Luther King Avenue with you because your lifestyle is so removed and so different from our society. I can't share Rockside Road with you. You got to have your own 10 acres because we live, everybody else melts in and assimilates. Again, go into an Indian person from India, go into their home, and you're going to see a totally different life. Totally different way of walking, and yet they share the same sidewalks and roads as all of us, and it keep the current moves. So it's like we're creating these pockets that are never going to be happy with what they have. And where I found problem with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in Israel, what I felt and the narrative sold to me, suffocating these people and imprisoning these people on a Gaza Strip and cutting them off from the outside world and increasing their levels of disparity. At the same time, I'm the superpower. You lost, you're out. So we either make, this is what you get. Take it or leave it, or leave it means you don't exist. It's not we're going shipping you to Australia. You just don't exist anymore. So fair deal is take what you get. Sad part is these are people we're talking about. Yeah. And this is a very cold way of talking about people. So no human in their right mind is just going to swallow that pill. No. So we might be comfortable in our zone for now, but at some point retaliation is inevitable. So in that moral consideration, are you forced to never allow them to even attempt at coexistence? You have to. You have to let them try. But every single time, the human nature is always going to lead to this conflict where you just bomb a concert or attack innocent people.
Yeah, and the other part is, too, I think we tend to forget because we are now the dominant force. We came into their land and took it over. I think this was probably about the last section of kind of human society.
But are you going to pretend if it wasn't us, it was going to be someone else? Like, if it wasn't us, it's France or it's Spain here's the deal. No matter who it is, China, Russia, if Christopher Columbus wasn't such a dyslexic and actually ended in India, okay, then who does end up here? Yep. It's not right now in 2023. This is still not sticks and smoke. There are skyscrapers here.
Yeah.
Who built them? So be thankful it's those evil assholes that gave you a plot of land to build casinos and not the whole rest of the gambit that would have your head on pikes with a smile. And 1,000 years later, it's so forgotten, we didn't even know your heads existed. Be thankful. We build baseball teams that cherish your heritage. We didn't snuff out your history. We embrace it. We are the only one that carries the spirit of coexistence, and you still refuse to take any. It's this martyr narrative that refuses to put in the effort to coexist. I'm sorry.
Well, I think this is also like the robber coming into your house and then be like, well, why are you upset? I gave you your own room. You have your own room. I took the rest of your house, though. It's mine. And if you want to take it back, I'll kill you.
But you're pretending they had a house, right?
Well, it did have, they had
if
land
you
and
had
territory.
a 5-year-old playing with sticks in the middle of a Metro Park land, is it the 5-year-olds? You were going to do nothing with this. You didn't even know you had it. You just kept praying to the cloud that you're just happy to be eating pork or whatever, eating a deer leg. Like I'm sorry. I'm not trying to belittle their existence, but also if we're going to take the macroscopic view that AI is an inevitability, like if we're going to take these conspiracy theories of other human races that built the pyramids and tapped into frequencies and waves and technologies that we don't even understand, and we're starting again from square one. If evolution, the blue-haired liberal narrative, is always going to be evolution, then it's stupid to pretend that, oh, well, but, have feelings for the people still pounding rocks. They were inevitably going to be snuffed out. So just be happy we kept you in a fish tank to look at and ooh and ah over like a museum, because otherwise you were being left behind no matter what. What's also interesting, I did just because this one also cool thought that I got exposed to this past week. Everybody points to Egypt as a reason as to why our history, there may have been a human history that's been wiped away, and there was a sophistication beyond our understanding that we lost. But then other people point to other parts of the world and go, look at they at that same period, carbon dating. No, that can't be the case because these people were so primal. These people were so far behind. They didn't come up with floating cars using frequency. But how's that any different than the guy holding an iPhone today and a dude still rubbing sticks in Africa? So I think this is an inevitable scale of humans alive at the same time. But we also cannot pretend that we should let the guy rubbing sticks beat the guy with the iPhone, even though he would always lose every time over. Just have a heart. It's like, okay, then you should have a heart when the alligator eats the gazelle, right? Have a heart. Have a heart that nature is beating the other piece of nature. This is the ladder, the step ladder to the next zone. And yes, there will be people in the next zone that are farther behind than us. But that doesn't mean that's an excuse to hold back its evolution. Brian's got a comment, and then David's got it. I talk too much.
Yes. William Shatner.
Shatner.
Our country thrives on people complaining and feeling prideful in choosing a side and making it their identity. Tribal, it's a tribal sense of
totally true
way of thinking.
Well, yeah, it's in this this comes again to, this is probably one of the last sections of human history where we were okay with genocide, just a little bit of genocide to colonize and go through. Because now I don't think
is it genocide or is it war? Because you got to recognize, if they could have scalped all of us, they could only scalp some of us because we had better guns. But if they could have wiped us out, they would have too. This is called war. This isn't genocide. This wasn't putting a whole slew of Native Americans on a train and then mass gassing them. This was a line of war, and they were the enemy who lost. Were we the intruder? As you give an intruder home example, sure. Did we come to them? Yes. But at the same time, did we turn at another crown, a bigger one? They should have won too. But we were the weaker, we were the David in that scenario against Goliath. And yet we persevered. So at the point at which they would have won, that, but also let's go back to you said
Well, but
history.
what do you say? So where you say war, and I see war as a kind of a like a country against country, like a unified force against unified force. Where we know with the Native Americans was they weren't all unified. Just one tribe over in Minnesota wasn't the same tribe that's in Ohio. That wasn't the same.
Right. So we
tribe
took
down
over
in-
Europe, right?
Because
They
I think
just-
where genocide begins and like war stops and genocide begins is where you start just targeting others outside of the like, well, hey,
wait. So we're talking about the Dakota tribe,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And they were Minnesota.
Yep.
Miami University is called Miami because the Miami tribe was predominantly Ohio.
Yep.
Okay. So what if we're going to take the logic of we should have an electoral college, we're going to talk about California's deficit. If we're going to have this understanding of the balance of states, because at its root, its policy basis is that we are a collection of 50 countries under the veil of one giant country for security, power, and safety. Okay?
Yep.
If that's going to be the concept, then we need to recognize that Dakota in Minnesota was a different country than the Miami tribe in Miami. But how's that any different than when England went across Eastern Europe or Rome went across North Africa,
Yeah.
right? So Rome went across North Africa, and let's say they took out Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Turkey and all these areas. How's it any different? How's it any different just because we look at them as an all? If I could call them all cowboys,
Yeah.
how does that not change? This is, yeah, we call them all Indians, but it was the Apache, Cuyahoga. We go through them all, but they were all different countries. And so what we weren't doing was saying, we want you all dead. What we said was, we want this, the ground, this, and all of its resources. I want the pelts. I want the wood. I want the oil in it. I want its resources. You're on it. And you won't let me take the resources without you fighting me on it. So you got to go. But it is weird that they took 3,000 guys and sent them to, maybe we should do some more research. I'd love to know what happened at that fort. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it was good for them.
It was probably the Trail of Tears, if anything. I think that's the big where we kind of our big real genocidal moment where we took them north, took them south, and they kind of not a whole lot of them made it from there. But they
did go.
They did go.
And guess what? We gave them all of Canada, and Canada was like, yeah, there's more land here than we know how to count. So find a spot where we're not. And it worked out for everybody. Not everybody that didn't make it. But guess what? What do you want me to do for you? I don't have the ability to, Willy Wonka chocolate launch you to the other side of the continent. And at the same time, we don't have cars. So get on your horse, Sally. And if some of you miss it, it's still better than my musket, right? Because that's the only other option. And any other form of war isn't, hey, let's coexist. I don't resonate with this genocide, woe is me, because there's never been a conflict amongst people where people are conquered and there's such a I'm a Greek boy. I didn't conquer this land. So I have no investment in coming to arms and defending what America did. But what I do see are all the fruits that I benefited from and how great this country is. And this is so much better than me herding goats in Greece and this still being a stick rubbing joint. So this is better. And at the same time, you should be thankful that it didn't go any other way, because this is the first time in human history where we sought the resolution of coexistence over death as much as possible. And the only time death was chosen was when it was politically necessary. I do want to circle back to the point that you made about Abraham Lincoln when I pushed you on what the fault was in this scenario, and you said it was changing his mind on who lives and who dies. You put an interesting spin on that, because the God complex of like drawing that line is not, when you make a legal policy or a legal rule, consideration should be outcome, policy, and what you're trying to accomplish. What is it? Deterrence? Is it, giving resolution to the victim, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
That being said, in this scenario, you make a rule for a death sentence. The reason we should all agree, the reason for a death sentence should be because this person cannot be rehabilitated, right? Like you cannot reassimilate back into society, whatever the case may be. So how do you determine that? The severity of crime, intention of the person, I don't know. That's for greater minds, but they have considered it. So when you're trying to consider how many of these people die, notice how that line went, right? It was,
It started at 303.
Well, it was 303, and he reconsidered it because he thought that was genocide. That's too many. But what did he do? They didn't go back to retrial. He just changed what warranted the death penalty. But, and this is to David's conflict, when considering what should warrant the death penalty, it should only be the outcome, deterrence, resolution of the victim, all the other values, not how many people end up dying. If that's the balance, then that consideration is at its root totally faulty. Now, that being said, a grotesque necessary is leaders making decisions that always aren't moral because of the ends that it brings for its people. He had to consider the uprising of these citizens that were attacked. At the same time, justice still needed to be served, and going away with nobody, too, is nobody. Like that, it wasn't going to be satisfactory. So we needed to come up with a balance. Now, I want to consider, and this is where I'm going to flip it to you.
Okay.
Consider the yin and the yang. Every good leader is like Caesar. Is it better to be loved or to be hated? And in most human flaws, but also just the symptom of being a leader, you're going to do great things and you're going to do bad things. And the balance of those things determine, in the end, were you good? Were you bad? So take somebody like Obama, your first black president, that I personally do not think he united us because he spoke to only half of the country. He didn't speak to all of us, and that's why half of the country was upset, and that's what we live with today. That being said, he was considered the best spoken president we've ever had. So you have this eloquent speaker that addresses the country with compassion and with the spirit of unification, and was the first black president. I guess that means something. Some would say it's an immutable characteristic that means nothing, but that's on balance with the most unmanned drone killings in human history, and being somebody that's going to go down in history as one of the biggest war criminals in the U.S. president's seat. You know what? He's going to make the claim. I adopted this crazy situation from George Bush, and I had to reconcile what was put in my lap. So nobody's going to argue killing Osama bin Laden. He was revered for that. So a necessary evil. Blowing up a wedding where a guy who knew a guy was there, probably the worst thing you could have done.
Yep, not justifiable.
So how do you balance? So I'm throw Obama out. The yin and the yang's just so bad, you're out. When it comes to Abraham Lincoln, he did one of the greatest things to ever happen to our country. Something that it would have been beautiful for it to be from this country's inception. I literally don't think that's possible. Like anybody with a brain that can indicate like the climate of the world at that time, and like the first people to ever scratch their heads and go, hey, this is probably immoral, were the people that carry its fucking scar worse than anybody else. Like nobody else is held more guilty for slavery than us.
Yeah.
And we were the only in the first time in human history to be like, hey, we should stop doing this thing we're doing. So to me, he's done one of the greatest things, but then also has this one asterisk. I see it as necessary. I personally see it as unavoidable. Like we tried to coexist with these people. They were starving, desperate, and angry. They retaliated against us, whether we were encroaching them or not. They were desperate because they were starving, admitted in both articles. That being said, then you have to act. I don't think this is a human fault or a fault of a leader. This was a necessary decision. I don't know. So I want to hear your kind of breakdown of that yin and yang, good versus bad on him and just generally for leaders.
Well, so you do bring up a good point here where there is more to consider than just the one single action that he did in reference to the Dakota tribe. I am still hung up on just the fact that there is this barometer that was changing based on just the thoughts and feels of those in that particular community, or in that, we'll call it a settlement, where there is just it's too flexible. I just hate that when it comes to leaders. Well, now it's flexible because it just kind of benefits me a little bit more to be able to do that. It's very typical politician. I think that's one factor we don't like with politicians in general. That kind of ever changing. I like a set of morals and you stick to it. Now, one thing would be interesting to have. I'd love to interview him on this. Hey, what were your thought process going into this? Was there, did you come from it?
So do you think there's a world, the man who freed the slaves? Because you're holding this guy, you're holding him victim to a decision he made.
Yep.
So I have to ask, play it the other way, alternate history. The man who freed the slaves and understands the value of human life decides to what? They were convicted.
Yep.
So he can't intervene on a whole nother balance of government. There's three. This is a total separate arm.
Sure.
Executive actually can't intrude. So they were tried in a court of law. According to this one liberal Minnesota law professor, it was a sham trial. But is it really a sham if we bring in a group of people and go, did you kill them? Well, yeah. Okay. And yeah, they cry because it wasn't fair because there was a language barrier. Okay, back to my point. There was a language barrier with the redheaded guy that came over here too that was treated poorly. But guess what? He figured it out. He was starving, didn't have potatoes, and decided he wanted to figure it out. So there's a language barrier here. You're starving and desperate, but you don't want to figure it out. So staying grounded.
Okay. All right.
You're Abraham Lincoln. In alternate history, explain to me what the world looks like when you decide to, I don't even know how that looks. Do you break the conviction of the justice system? I don't even know how an executive branch officer would do that. Yeah. How does the president or anyone intervene on a total separate branch's decision? That being said, now they've come with a conviction and you want to what? Change then the sentence? Is that how it transpires? So then what? They're convicted and then you're letting them the best thing you could do is change the law in such a way that as few lives as necessary are killed. But I can't throw away the sentence because I'm not the legislative branch that creates the sentence, and I can't throw away the conviction because I'm not the justice branch. Literally, the man that cares about human lives the most, in my mind, the only thing, the most he could do is boil down the number of 303 to as low as possible without so much civil unrest we have the country burning down. So 2 is 0. 2 is 0. 38 is, in my opinion, as low as it gets. Now you're coming up with put it in a legal sense. Be a policymaker. You are trying to concoct like gerrymandering. You're trying to concoct factors as to why a human will die that don't apply to everybody. Okay, get the feather factor off. Every guy wearing a feather, that's all of them. But every guy holding a sword? Or how about this? Every guy with blood on their hands. Well, only 2 of them smeared the blood under their eyeballs, like war paint. Okay. How many of them were holding weapons with blood on them? 38. Okay, you get what I'm saying? Now you have to come up with real policy that you're trying to, you're not going to get it at your first go. I can promise you he didn't go to the country and go, okay, guys, I was at this for a long flipping time. Did about 6 different iterations, whittled it down to 38. I guarantee the only people that knew he took multiple attempts at it was somebody within his cabinet. Somebody deep within the administration in a history log acknowledges that this took multiple attempts, and it wasn't us until 200 years later with the grand scope that sees, okay, yeah, he went back and attempted this a couple of times. But that attempt had no nefarious action. And again, putting yourself in Caesar's shoes, I don't see... I want your consideration.
Okay.
How does this look in any other faction without like he had, in my opinion, I'm going to pose it to you as a statement, but a question.
Okay.
I'm going to say he had to make a decision where lives had to be killed. There was the justice system came up with a conviction, and he could only manipulate the sentence so far from the executive branch. So how does he affect this without fault in the perfect life-loving way you thought was appropriate with the Abraham Lincoln brand?
Probably. So if I were to go back, probably the other solution, which I don't know if that article got deep enough into this, would be to just outright remove them, put them somewhere else.
Which that's where they were. They were in there somewhere else, and they fought back.
Yeah.
The somewhere else is hungry. I'm hungry in the somewhere else. You guys are collecting all the animals. Not enough deer are walking through the somewhere else. But I'm watching you sit around your cabins with fires with legs roasting. And I'm freaking hungry. And I got a cool scalped collection of your freaking heads. Like, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was the somewhere else.
It's hard to understand because we're in 2023, about to be 2024, and this is back in 1860 something, right around there. I think it was about 260 years about.
Yeah.
So it's So it putting our heads in that time probably going to be a little bit difficult. And was this done in earnest to reduce the amount of lives, or was this done to just get rid of backlash? I don't think we know that in entirety. There's one angle. I think the angle you present there is like, well, hey, I'm trying to reduce the amount of lives killed as possible, and I probably come out at the angle of, I don't know if I revere this life as much as others. So I don't want to be seen as genocide, but I don't want to be seen as a pushover. So I gotta do a happy middle. I think that's where that disconnect is, and what that true thought process was, and where I think I don't value this life as much as others come from is just the actions the government took before Lincoln and then after Lincoln, all the way up to about Jefferson was before Lincoln, but right around that time, they didn't revere these people very highly.
That's the stage that was set for him. Like, if our dialogue is this leader at this time, that isn't his cross to bear. What preceded him and set the stage isn't his fault. He's got to make do with the pieces in front of him. So here, let's get to our wrapping thoughts.
Okay.
I think, of course, this is a dark asterisk to our history, but us sharing a bourbon in a lit up studio, making a productive step towards the future of humanity, this doesn't happen in the stick rubbing world. So this whole narrative of, but this was theirs, good, cool. Guess what? That was at a time when everybody was fighting for all the land. It's kind of like the beginning of the game Risk. And now all of the spots are picked. Everybody's got a spot. There is no land. There's not some mysterious island off of the coast of Australia that hasn't been found yet. The whole rock has been explored. Everything is accounted for. And everybody has we've written enough treaties and enough agreements that have been stricken to where the people that are savages that will eat each other like cannibals, they get to just speak on their island, unaffected, and we aren't going up north. There are a bunch of beta cucks above us that would be bent over a barrel. And we just go, hey, chip cheerio, let's share some tea, baby. In fact, you be in the hat of our glorious country, you get to, like that little bitch bird that pecks at the back of a rhino. That's you, Canada. You get to be the bitch bird. You just peck it like my dingleberries on my ass and an ant that crawls on my back. And in return, you get all my dingleberries. You're totally fed. And my dingleberries are clean. I'm clean. At the same time, you get security that you otherwise would never have. And if I ever wanted to just turn and eat you, I could. But that's not the way of the world. That's not the way of the world. So I don't like these skeletons in a closet that are sins against people that never carried them. These were the pieces we were dealt. This is the world I live in. And you don't get to hold the convictions of people that were here before me over me, because the people that birthed me didn't have anything to do with that either. So we were playing with goats. Atrocities happened here. And all of us who are from totally different walks of life, totally different ancestor trees, get to enjoy the fruits of a free world that will, whether or not this Rome 2 falls, Rome 2.0, whether or not this falls, this will be the tip of the spear, the leading torch, the trailblazer to the one world that, if done right, we understand what the World Health Organization and the WHO, all those people, we understand what they're trying to do. World Economic Forum, they want a one world government that they can control. But I think if the people win, and the way the people win, the way this is a united world with 100 different countries that are locally run, but democracy and unity amongst all of them in one unified board, that comes with the spirit and narrative of what America started. So whether this falls or not, this has planted a seed in people of hope and a goal. There are still people from shitty places that are giving everything they can to immigrate here for a reason. And it's because we are the beacon of opportunity. That beacon of opportunity doesn't exist without the things that led to it. And I'm sorry, that's like, it's just, the question is, how far back do you want to go on the timeline? We could go back to when these tribes first met of cave people. And these people kill, like, they're not any of us. Here's what you should be thankful for. I don't just walk into a 7-Eleven and kill a stranger that doesn't look like me. In fact, we share a professional place. We share streets, roads, schools, hospitals, and you get the benefit of my innovations in existence, and I get the benefit of yours. So how can you damn that world with something that literally doesn't even exist anymore? And the only people that still carry that grudge have a lawless land given to them that's totally removed from our taxes, still get our safety, right? Kim Jong-un isn't a threat to them because, again, just like the dingleberry bird, we've got them covered, and they get the fruits of that safety, and we get the fruits of this beautiful chapter in human existence. I just don't understand how we can still continue to peddle this narrative like, why? I don't even understand why it's worth even discussing. It's so far behind us, so moot, and this doesn't exist without that happening. And again, if it wasn't between a white guy from England and the guy in a mohawk, it was just going to be another tribesman. So it was the way of the world. Conquer or be conquered. And we're well beyond that. This is the new civil world. And if you can't assimilate in the civil world, then you still are an antagonist that may be a problem. I don't know.
So I think one of the things we do here in the United States, I think a lot better than most other countries do, is understanding our atrocities and kind of throwing out there, like, yeah, we did have slaves. Ooh, yeah, we did commit one of the worst acts in human history, bombing Japan twice and carpet bombing Korea after that. Understanding that and putting that in the forefront and learning from that, I think what makes us uniquely American. You don't see a whole lot of that with other countries very often. You don't see it with UK, I think, starting to come to peace with that. Australia, maybe a little bit. Japan is maybe moving that direction, kind of. But we're not. We do it a lot better than most other countries do. So genocide, I think we can all agree on, is awful. And what is society without learning from our mistakes and learning how we can be better as people and how we can at least go to conclusions that cause less death, I think is the topic of this discussion. And I think the article as well showcased that, yeah, even our best of us still had their faults. and here's how we can go about that or make that different. I don't disagree with you in the slightest that this in that time it was a conquered or be conquered world, but at the same time we can acknowledge that, move beyond, and go, hey, oh God, this sucks. So we let those who are historic Native Americans have their own land, have their own place. They kind of govern a bit more onto themselves. It's not a perfect solution, and definitely I think knowing what we know now, and I wonder if the leaders kind of knew what would end up being if they would go back and change it. That'd be a really great hypothetical to really go deep dive into. If they would still make the same actions today, knowing what would happen, 160 years from now, I have a feeling they probably would still, but putting that in the forefront and learning from it, I think is what makes us uniquely American. And we do this so much better than most other countries do, or at least, especially at the level we've done a lot of bad things and still keep moving on and try to make things at least somewhat better after we do it.
Well said. Well said. Brian, wrapping thoughts.
Putting in my 2 $5 bills, as some might think about. I agree the asterisk should probably be removed from this because we don't know we're taking it from some guy who had some opinion about this event who it could have gone. There could have been other thought processes behind it. The three branches of government. And one thing that the article did highlight, which is totally, I don't know, like fear provoking or whatever. The one out of the 38 people didn't die initially. The rope was cut and he fell to the ground.
How many?
One of the 38. And so he had to be rehung.
Oh God!
Yeah,
so I know it's totally unnecessary to bring that up.
There used to be. I think that's traditional hanging and or death by execution rules. If you survive, I know like the guillotine. If you're to take two, you're set. Go. You're good.
If you were to take 2 guillotines,
yeah,
and survive
during the end of the French Revolution, those blades got so dull, cutting so many heads that there were a couple people that lived just by the sheer fact
after twice.
They probably weren't.
But here's
great.
the thing: your spine would be severed.
There's a lot
like
of
you might still be connected by your throat, but like.
Well, I don't think they were severed. I think they cut just deep enough once. Came in. It's just so dull. It's like oof, yeah, but ugh.
What I don't want to get us derailed, but like there was a fact about the last hanging in France happened at the same time as like.
It's been very recent. We have lived in the same world as the last hanging, and I think even up until the very recently in the United States.
Yeah. Boom. Here we go. The last execution by guillotine in France occurred in 1977, the same year the first Star Wars film was originally released.
Guillotine. Oof.
Wrapping thoughts. Don't hang Indians. Use that musket.
Just hang in there.
All right. This is crazy, dude. That was not how we wanted to end this thing. The whole thing was gross and sad, and I'm not a fan of it, but history's history. Thanks for watching this clip from the Rethink Tank Live. Join us every Tuesday at 7 p.m. streaming across the platforms on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. We do our best to promote user engagement, and we want you involved. So be sure to bring your perspective live so we can get you in the dialogue. See you then.